It's the top of the hour. Time for a quick weather check. When you wake up in the morning, there'll be lots of clouds and fog around. No rain in the forecast for your Thursday, though. Overnight low temperatures between 45 and 50 degrees. Enjoy your evening.
On World News tonight, the U.S. Embassy in Afghanistan, unused for more than a decade, burned down today. The Taliban's enemies inside Afghanistan, our correspondent is with them. Thousands of U.S. airline workers laid off without notice or severance pay, feeling betrayed by management. Now it's the trucks that have the security services nervous, and America runs on trucks. The Canadian connection. Is Canada a weak link in the security shield?
From ABC News World Headquarters in New York, this is World News Tonight with Peter Jennings.
Good evening, everyone. We're going to begin tonight with a terrorist ring that appears to have been deeply penetrated because a man talked. As Americans know from experience, the targets which terrorists often favor represent American interests overseas. ABC's Brian Ross is with us tonight. Brian, who is the man? How'd they get him to talk?
Peter, he is a suspected bin Laden operative by the name of Jamal Begal, an Algerian who was picked up in the Persian Gulf country of Dubai with a forged French passport. French interrogators arrived, questioned him, and they say he began talking almost immediately about a series of attacks scheduled to take place sometime later this year across Europe.
The French interrogation can be extremely tough, I think, as we know from history. What were the targets?
The targets included the American embassy in Paris, the U.S. consulate in Marseille, as well as buildings at NATO headquarters in Belgium and the European Parliament building in Strasbourg. An ambitious set of targets that authorities aren't even sure they could have carried out.
Penetrated the ring, broken the ring.
In total, they say there are about 50 members of this cell across Europe. To date, 30 have been taken into custody. Another 20 are being sought in a European-wide manhunt tonight.
In the Intelligence Committee and the law enforcement community, that's the good news for the day.
That's the good news.
Many thanks, Brian. Here at home, by the way, the government has arrested or detained now at least 352 people in connection with the investigation into the attacks here, but nobody has been charged with any crime that is directly related to the hijackings and the attacks in New York and or at the Pentagon. As we looked out at the world today, one of the things we saw was an American embassy on fire. And it is a reminder that whatever the U.S. does to get Osama bin Laden or the Afghan government that has protected him, it will surely inspire a reaction, such as the war on terrorism in the year 2001. So let's go to Afghanistan and ABC's Mike Lee.
It was an angry march on a virtually deserted U.S. embassy. There have been no American diplomats stationed here since 1989, only a few Afghan guards, and they were easily overwhelmed. Death to Americans, they said, and long live Osama bin Laden. It's not clear whether the Taliban organized the protest, but they clearly supported it. With more than 1 million people trying to get out of Afghanistan, the Taliban leader Mohammed Omar today tried to convince them to stay. An American attack is unlikely, he said, and even if we are attacked, you will be safe. Far from the capital, the Taliban's main military opposition, the Northern Alliance, was sending more fighters to the front lines today. Both sides said they had the upper hand, but the fact is the front lines haven't moved much over the years. Everywhere you go here, you find reminders of how tough the terrain can be and how old and worn some of the alliance's weaponry is. America's new potential military partner here may be ill-equipped, but alliance fighters have some advantages U.S. forces could find useful. Years of combat experience, an intimate knowledge of the terrain and the enemy, and a reputation for being ruthless.
Would it be good to have American money to buy more weapons?
No, we have enough weapons. All we want is for America to bomb Osama bin Laden's headquarters. They may be disappointed if the U.S. takes its time. Mike Lee, ABC News in northern Afghanistan.
As you probably heard, one of the countries that's offered to help in Afghanistan is Russia. And Russia has been fighting its own war in the region of Chechnya, which it controls. Today, the White House made a gesture to Russia, and our White House correspondent Terry Moran is with us. Terry, I gather the Bush administration may be changing its policy or at least its attitude on the Russian war in Chechnya.
Not its policy, Peter, but certainly they're changing their tune. As you noted, Russia's been fighting a brutal war against separatists in Chechnya, and for years the Clinton administration condemned what it called human rights violations by Russia in their prosecution of that war. Today, 2 days after President Putin pledged strong support for the U.S. in its campaign against terrorism, the Bush administration took a strong stand against the Chechen separatists, accusing them of having been infiltrated by Osama bin Laden and the al-Qaeda network, and calling on the Chechnya leadership to immediately and unconditionally cut all ties to them. The president still said dialogue is the way to go, but this is strong support for President Putin.
Thanks, Terry. Terry Moran at the White House. Thank you very much. ABC News has learned that President Bush is going to announce a dramatic increase in the Air Marshals program tomorrow, and that the marshals will be on a majority of civilian flights. The president's also going to announce support for stronger cockpit doors, but he does not, we are told, favor arming pilots. We also learned the White House is considering federal control of airport security, including a military presence. On the subject of the airlines, Delta Airlines said today it is laying off 12,000 employees and reducing its service by 15%. Now, the airline industry as a whole has cut more than 130,000 jobs since the terrorist attacks on September the 11th, and some airline employees are crying foul. Here's ABC's Dean Reynolds.
It was bright and sunny outside Local 1487 of the Machinists Union today, but inside, the mood was dark.
12-year seniority, told to go on home, no pay.
The Chicago area members work for the airlines, or at least they used to.
Their whole world has been turned upside down. How would you expect them to feel? They never saw this coming. They never saw this coming.
Industry-wide, the tens of thousands of layoffs involve not just clerks and ticket takers. More than 500 pilots are included in American Airlines' 20,000 cuts.
The rank and file is obviously upset by management's actions, and they do feel somewhat betrayed.
Betrayed because American and some other carriers have invoked a clause in their labor contracts that allows them to eliminate jobs in an emergency without notice or severance pay. Terry Barnett has been with American for 5 years in Seattle. He received his layoff notice on Monday.
Not only am I no longer needed, but there won't be anything provided for me in way of compensation whatsoever.
At a time when they're calling on their employees to restore confidence in this industry, they slap them in the face by saying, by the way, those contract commitments we made to you, they're no good.
Suggestions that the airlines might be trying to capitalize on the crisis are vigorously rejected by the industry.
Delta is absolutely not using this as a measure to clean its financial house.
Still, many of the laid-off workers wonder why the industry gets a $15 billion bailout from the federal government, but they get nothing. Daisy Coleman has been an American ticket agent in Chicago for 38 years.
I won't get by. I will definitely have to get a job someplace, and so that I can make my ends meet.
Because late today, the ticket office where she works was closed for good. Dean Reynolds, ABC News, Chicago.
To security again, one of our security analysts said an obvious but important thing today. In the war against terrorism, American security is very dependent on Canadian security. Canadian intelligence officials acknowledge there are 50 known terrorist organizations, including Osama bin Laden's al-Qaeda, which may have operatives in Canada. And so tonight, ABC's Ron Claiborne reports from Toronto.
It is the longest undefended border in the world. Someone wanting to do harm to the U.S. would have little trouble getting across it. U.S. and Canadian officials say some terrorist groups have taken advantage of Canada's loose immigration laws to get to Canada, then slip into the United States.
Canada is regarded, not incorrectly, by terrorist organizations as a launching pad for operations against the U.S.
But only now, since September 11th, have many Canadian citizens realized how often the country's open policy toward immigration has been abused.
We knew these people were in Canada. We knew that they might well be involved in planning operations beyond Canadian borders, and we did fundamentally nothing about that.
Professor Wesley Wark of the University of Toronto says Canada should have done more.
Looking back, it's an embarrassment. I think it's a scandal.
Every year, nearly 30,000 foreigners who arrive in Canada claim refugee status. They can remain here for years while the courts decide their cases. Many who are turned down stay anyway. Ahmed Ressam lived in Montreal for years, even though he was facing a deportation order. He was arrested by U.S. officials in 1999 as he was on his way to blow up Los Angeles airport. A more recent case, Nabil Al-Marab, linked by investigators to 2 of the World Trade Center hijackers. Last June, Al-Marab, who lived in this Toronto apartment building, was caught trying to enter the United States with a false passport. Criminal charges were filed against him, then Canadian authorities released him on his own recognizance. When Prime Minister Jean Chrétien visited Washington this week, he was pressed very hard on these issues.
And we have a good security service system, and we have a very excellent police in Canada. But, as I explained earlier, nobody comes in Canada with a sign, I'm a terrorist.
The next day, Canadian officials declared the highest state of alert at their airports and borders and said they would tighten security checks of immigrants. Ron Claiborne, ABC News, Toronto.
There was some good news for the United States today. The Palestinian leader Yasser Arafat and the Israeli Foreign Minister Shimon Peres met for the first time in almost 3 months. They agreed to resume security coordination, and Israel said it would ease the blockade of the Palestinian territories. Many Arab countries have stressed that an easing in that conflict is necessary before they'll support the U.S. effort against terrorism. When we come back, we'll take a closer look at the terrorists in the trucks. How real is that threat? And tonight, speaking for the firefighters in Washington.
A question of good health from the Tylenol Company and Johnson & Johnson Merck. Cold and flu season's coming. Time to ask what's in your medicine cabinet.
I have no idea what's in there.
Here's how to get your medicine cabinet in shape for the season. Throw out all the old stuff you don't use anymore. Remove any medicines with old expiration dates. Then restock with the things you'll need. For more tips, look for this display in stores everywhere.
This year I will be ready.
It's a question of good health from our family to yours.
Take a look at this. Centuries underwater. It's such a thrill to restore these artifacts to their original beauty. And that's why new Crest White Strips are so great. In just 2 weeks, they restore your teeth to their original whiteness. It's a simple little strip. Just 30 minutes twice a day to whiten teeth 10 times better. And it's so easy to wear. While I'm doing my thing, it's doing its thing.
New Crest White Strips. Reveal your wider smile.
Tired of struggling down glass after glass of powdered fiber for regularity? Consider refreshing glasses of water with FiberCon tablets. A whole lot easier to take.
And every bit as effective as powder.
FiberCon, refreshingly easier to take.
The long jump. The dash. Life is like a sport, and your feet take the impact hard. But new Stride Guard insoles absorb 50% more heel impact than these Dr. Scholl's. Take more impact in stride. New Stride Guard insoles.
The Heartburn Hotel. If you suffer persistent heartburn 2 days a week or more, despite diet change and treatment, it may be acid reflux disease. Prescription Prevacid can mean 24-hour relief from acid reflux disease. Prevacid turns off tiny pumps that produce acid. It has a low occurrence of side effects, such as diarrhea, abdominal pain, and nausea. Ask your doctor if Prevacid is right for you.
So leave your heartburn behind!
We're going to take a closer look tonight at another source of nervousness about terrorism these days. About 20 people have been arrested in the last 2 weeks for illegally obtaining licenses to haul hazardous material. And now people are concerned that trucks can be used to carry explosives. 9 million people in the country have licenses to drive trucks, and 2.5 million are permitted to haul hazardous materials. Here's ABC's Ned Potter.
At the entrance to New York's Lincoln Tunnel this afternoon, police were checking every truck for suspicious cargo.
Any chemicals?
But security people concede it is possible for an aspiring terrorist to slip through.
The mind does not have to be too creative or constructive to realize what could happen if one of those vehicles fell into the wrong hands and the product was ignited.
Americans know that all too well. From Oklahoma City, the U.S. Embassy bombings in 1998, the first attack on the Trade Center in 1993. All of those were truck bombs, very destructive, even though they were simple in design. And authorities worry, too, about more sophisticated attacks, perhaps the release of a dangerous gas on a busy street or at the foot of a high-rise building. But how do you find the one truck that may be intended to do harm without stopping the entire U.S. economy? 65% of the freight in this country is delivered by truck.
The general flow of trucks in this country is huge. We literally survive with trucks carrying goods for us in this country.
The industry is also made up of many different companies with a lot of independent drivers carrying all sorts of cargo.
There's just a broad variety of hazardous materials that are out there every day. We utilize these in commerce, and the American public benefits from these in commerce.
In the future, the best protection may come if drivers are better screened as they apply for licenses or jobs, and if new technology makes it easier to scan a truck's contents. But for now, officials say the best protection is thorough police work.
At the moment, literally, we're very dependent on what is going on in New York City right now, which is the visual scanning of vehicles.
Some officials say that just the threat of attack is making people nervous, that sometimes a terrorist's strongest weapon is terror itself. Ned Potter, ABC News, New York.
Mayor Giuliani went to Ground Zero again today. He's been there, it seems, almost every day. He said the site is now being treated as a burial ground. The mayor also said that soil from the site and even parts of the wreckage will be given to family members who feel it's important to have them. When we come back, a status report for the week on how Muslim Americans and Arab Americans are doing in the country. There's been some goodwill, and there is, of course, the hate.
What are you doing?
Laundry.
Laundry?
But I'm glad you're up. I've been waiting to vacuum. Breakfast. I'll pick up your tray when I get back from the market.
But it's Sunday. Aren't you going to lay around and watch football all day?
Not if I'm going to finish that roast in time for dinner.
Somebody had their Minute Maid this morning. It only takes a minute, but the feeling lasts all day.
Honey, what's the setting for chiffon?
The pain was awful. It got so bad I wanted to lie down, but the pain just got worse. Then I rediscovered Extra Strength Bayer. Nothing's proven stronger, not even the leading prescription. Beautiful.
Bayer, take it for pain, take it for life.
Too many high-interest monthly payments? Why not pay them off with a second mortgage with a no closing cost option from Ditech.com? Apply online now or call us at 1-800-71-FIXED. And there is no equity required. Ditech Second Mortgage with a no closing cost option can help you to consolidate your high-interest debts into one low monthly payment. It's smart money from Ditech.com. Apply online now or call us at 1-800-71-FIXED.
Out here, I'm in command. So am I supposed to say, slow down, guys, I'm constipated? I don't think so. You try to eat right. Sometimes you can't. Harsh chemical laxatives, they can kick in whenever and wherever. Not an option. So I rely on doctor-recommended Metamucil. It's got 100% natural fiber. Works with my body, gently, which is important to a sensitive guy like myself.
Metamucil, the doctor's natural choice for regularity.
When dentures dream, they see the perfect denture cleanser. One with the stain-fighting power of Efferdent and the freshening power of Listerine. Well, little friend, dream no more. It's really here. It's called Efferdent Plus. It's extra fresh, and nothing gets your dentures cleaner. Efferdent Clean and Listerine Fresh. That's Efferdent Plus.
Maalox Quick Dissolve challenges regular Tums. Who dissolves quicker? Maalox. Neutralizes more acid. Maalox. Has more calcium. Maalox. 3 ways the right choice is Maalox Quick Dissolve. Agree or it's free.
Tomorrow, Diane Sawyer reports from an F-15 fighter protecting our skies. What are the new rules for pilots who encounter something suspect? Good Morning America tomorrow.
President Bush had separate meetings with Muslim and Sikh leaders at the White House today, and once again the president said he will not allow them to be victims of hate. There are such victims in the country this week. We hear, for example, of Arab students at U.S. colleges leaving the country because they're afraid. Kuwait and Saudi Arabia are both paying for their citizens to go home if they want to. And one Arab American organization reports that more than 625 anti-Muslim incidents have occurred in the past 2 weeks, more than there were in all of last year. Here's ABC's Dan Harris.
Mohammed Al-Hadis, a graduate student at American University in Washington, D.C., is so scared he's heading home to the Middle East.
I feel now we are unwelcome here in this country.
The fear in the Muslim community is widespread. Tony Zorhivandi, a U.S. businessman of Iranian descent, says he was banned from a commercial flight because he apparently made the pilot nervous. There have been 11 similar reports.
I was hurt because, like I said, I'm a citizen of United States of America, and I believe during the Pledge of Allegiance you said liberty and justice for all, and I felt like on that day it wasn't liberty and justice for me.
Many Muslims also say the FBI is targeting them indiscriminately and inappropriately. Ali Erikanolu, an American-born electrician, says agents came to his home in New Jersey last week and, in tough questioning, made false accusations and challenged his patriotism.
I always thought they were the good guys. And when they came into my home and acted in the manner that they did, I felt raped.
While many Muslims complain of harassment and discrimination, they do acknowledge a significant counter-trend, a wave of goodwill gestures. Non-Muslims forming protective prayer circles around mosques, wearing headscarves in a show of solidarity, and writing letters of support.
It breaks my heart to see people being attacked or harassed. What happened to the love?
While these acts of kindness don't get as much attention, Muslims say even in this time of tension, they've found that decency, not bigotry, is the norm. Dan Harris, ABC News, New York.
Now, there is, of course, other news in the country tonight. So in the national briefing, several items. A white police officer in Cincinnati was acquitted of all charges today in the fatal shooting of an unarmed black man last spring. The shooting led to 3 nights of rioting. The officer was charged with negligent homicide and obstructing official business, which are misdemeanors. Miami is going to ban the use of handheld cell phones while you are driving. It'll begin a year from now, the ban will. New York State has already banned them. And the National Sleep Foundation says that 1 in 5 drivers admit to falling asleep at the wheel last year. The government says that sleeping drivers cause 100,000 crashes a year and 1,500 deaths. When we come back, dealing with the stress of search and rescue.
Dear Aleve, I was always a morning person. It's the very best part of my day. So when arthritis pain robbed me of my mornings, I was determined to find relief. I tried Tylenol, but that painful morning stiffness was still there. Then my doctor told me about Aleve and a new clinical study.
In addition to all-day pain relief, Aleve is better than extra-strength Tylenol for relieving morning stiffness.
Now mornings are mine again, and that's a beautiful feeling. Thanks, Aleve.
29, 30.
Now at Red Lobster, you can get 30 mouth-watering shrimp for just $9.99. Red Lobster, go overboard.
Now, the same Caltrate that helps fight bone loss may help your colon too. In a recent study, Caltrate helped reduce the risk of recurrence of colon polyps, a risk factor for colon cancer. The same Caltrate you take for your bones, now for colon health too.
The Heartburn Hotel. If you suffer persistent heartburn 2 days a week or more, despite diet change and treatment, it may be acid reflux disease. Prescription Prevacid can mean 24-hour relief from acid reflux disease. Prevacid turns off tiny pumps that produce acid. It has a low occurrence of side effects, such as diarrhea, abdominal pain, and nausea. Ask your doctor if Prevacid is right for you.
So leave your heartburn behind.
Coming up next on K2 News, the FBI says terrorists may have targeted trucks filled with chemicals as possible weapons. How easy is it to get a license to transport hazardous materials? Portland tries to decide whether to continue funding for the city's Joint Terrorism Task Force and the plans to tighten security at Oregon's Capitol building. It's all next.
Well, in case you came in late, a brief review of the story we began with. A man captured in the Middle East this summer has revealed details of a plot to attack targets in Europe later this year, many of them with American connections, including the American embassy in Paris. The man is suspected of having ties to Osama bin Laden, and about 30 people have been detained in connection with the plot. Finally, this evening, the stress. We think everyone in the country has suffered some. But on Capitol Hill today, we were reminded again that the level of stress for those who struggled to save people on the 11th and their families is just so much deeper. We were listening to the chief medical officer of the New York Fire Department asking for help. Dr. Carrie Kelly in the first person.
The individual who becomes a firefighter is a very special person. They enter into a calling that sometimes defies explanation, as they head toward a call for help, knowing that they're putting themselves in harm's way. They must fight that instinctual desire to save oneself and move on to fight that fire and save a life. The families that nurture these members are also special because they send these people off to work each day with the belief that they will return safe and sound. The catastrophic losses that we have suffered have created a pain so deep because every part of our department is affected by these deaths. There are no safe havens. We have lost family at every level. The selflessness of these men is what made them heroes, but it's also what brings me here to these hearings today to urge your approval of funds to provide for the psychological and counseling needs of our members and their families. As we get further away from the events of that day, the officers, the firefighters, fire marshals, emergency medical technicians, and paramedics who have had to cope with delayed reactions to this experience need our help. In the first 100 years of our department's history, we filled a wall with the names of fallen firefighters. In a single day, 11th of September, we created a new wall. But the legacy of honor and strength that they left will be the foundation on which we rebuild this department.
That's our report on World News Tonight. Later this evening on Nightline, a special 1-hour edition, the battlefield that is, and always has been, Afghanistan. Tomorrow on World News, seeking protection from an anthrax attack. We're going through these fears one at a time, almost day by day. I'm Peter Jennings. Have a good evening and good night.
This has been a presentation of ABC News. More Americans get their news from ABC News than from any other source.
This fall, Friday is a whole new look.
Dude, that's your stepmom.
When Once and Again moves to its new night.
I don't hear anything, do you?
No.